Hello and welcome to Oak Road Hatter, where, as always, I'm joined by Jamie Castle. How are you doing, Jamie?
How am I doing? Good question. I think relief that I didn't travel down that way for last night. I think had I'd gone last night, I'd be even more peeved off, to be honest. So I mean, yeah. First of all, kudos to those that did travel down. Great support. But yeah, just feeling a bit frustrated. I think as a lot of Luton fans are right now, and obviously we'll get into the details shortly, but. Yeah, it's not a great Saturday morning to be a Hatter.
Yeah, as Jamie's touched on there, we're going to be discussing all things Plymouth Argyle versus Luton and what a result it was if you're a Plymouth fan. 3-1 to Plymouth Argyle under Wayne Rooney, and it's difficult to say, but they were probably deserving of the win. There was times where we looked like we had threats, but weren't finishing anything. We got into the box plenty of times. We had so many corners. I lost count of how many corners we got, but we just didn't threaten at all. And we're going to be dissecting it in a lot of detail in the next hour. But before then, if you don't follow us already, don't forget to follow us on our socials at Oak Road Hatter or on X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube, and share the video with anyone you think needs to know what we think about that performance. Rate us 5 stars on your audio listening platforms. We really appreciate the support. But we'll get straight into things. And yeah, Jamie, it was a pretty dire result. We weren't overly confident going into it, but we were confident we wouldn't lose the game. But yeah, it was not good at all. Let's talk me through that first goal we conceded.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, we weren't overly confident of getting a win going into it. I think if you'd looked at our score predictions, it was 4 draws and 2 wins. So I think most of us were going down there probably expecting not to lose, and certainly not in the manner that we did in the end. I actually thought we started all right. I think we definitely did control the sort of the first 5-10 minutes and looked to get in dangerous areas. I think Walters was having a lot of joy down that right hand side and got in behind quite a bit. So I was comfortable with that first sort of 10 minutes or so. But then with their first attack, I think it's just a bit of a summation of our season at the minute where somehow it just gets into our box. I mean, on that left hand side, Obafemi against Walters, he just cuts inside and manages to get like I'd call it a cross, but it's a pass. It's just like a small, like driven pass into the box that somehow evades both Burke's and Clark's feet. Gets into Ryan Hardy, and I think in that situation, I think almost like the other 2 goals, but we're just way too passive defensively. I think watching it back, McGuinness just sort of steps up with his hands behind his back and just his only thought is don't concede a pen, just try and get in the way, but I'm not going to be touch tight or try and actually tackle the fella, which gives Hardy the ability to just lay it off to Al-Hajj. And to be fair to the lad, great finish in the top left hand side. No chance for TK to save that. And I think then from there you just think, oh, not again. And I think that's the mind space that us as fans are in at the minute, is that not again. Here we go, same old Luton. And it's a feeling I recall having years ago, like when I was a kid growing up, in like sort of like the League One, League Two days, like, oh, not again, same old Luton. And it's sort of it seems like it's creeping back a little bit in terms of this team. I think obviously last year was a different story, and I think the location of where we were in the English pyramid, I think hid some of those thoughts. Whereas now, obviously, down into the Championship, it's almost expectations reset, and I think rightly we expect more of this team at the minute. And it's just I think in those situations when we're way too easy to score against, I think that that is when we are absolutely at our worst, is just defending too passively. And I think probably for me, one of the biggest issues for us right now is that.
Yeah, and we really have no plan B, as you've mentioned before. We seem to be stuck in this system that isn't working, and I think we've all discussed the two players in midfield before, but against Plymouth on Friday, it just didn't work at all, having just two in there. The ball
Yeah,
seemed to be getting through that midfield every single time they went forward, and I think you could see we were really missing Nakamba in there, who has been a big bonus since he returned, even though he's played very few minutes. And it was weird that he was sat on the bench and didn't really come on. Do you think he should have been on if he was fit, or would you have brought in someone like Pelly?
I think it's difficult to bring on the camera when you're losing. Right, I think I completely agree. The structure is wrong, and I don't think it's a back three issue. I think it's a midfield two issue. I think when you've got Kraus and Clark in there, and obviously Kraus I thought did okay under the circumstances. Whereas I think again Jordan Clark, I like the guy and I like him as a player, but I guess he's just not a central midfielder in a midfield two. I think if he was in there as part of a three, then it'd work a lot better. I just think I think that for me is one of the biggest issues right now. You just pass straight through. I think in terms of the actual question of bringing the Campbell on, I think the only opportunities to bring him on were when we're behind, and is that really the best use of a substitution? And I mean, I think the substitutions last night on the whole were obviously were with the intent to try and get a goal, obviously because we were behind. So I don't think bringing the Campbell on would have necessarily changed that, albeit unless it was for Walters or McGuinness, for example. Or, basically, if it was for a defender to go from a three to a four, that's the only circumstance where I feel it probably would have made sense to bring him on. But I definitely think we need to have a bit of a review on what we're doing. And as you say, no plan B. Even when we were losing, it was just like for like substitutions, really. And then you bring on Taylor and Cooley, and it's just like, well, you stick Cooley out on the right again, like you were doing with Morris. That wasn't working. So why are you doing it with Cooley Woodrow, who's less athletic and has less quality? And it's just it's really confusing right now in terms of what Rob's trying to do. I think we'll come on to the tweets that we'll go through from some of the fans, but it's just I think one of the common themes is just back to basics, and I think that's the one thing that I'm looking at now, sort of ahead of sort of Oxford on Tuesday, and then a massive trip away at Sheffield United on next Saturday. It's just back to basics and just have no stupid mistakes. Try and not control the game, because that's what we're trying to do now, but just sort of have a bit more balance to the way the team is. And I think we just lack balance with that two-man midfield.
And another area that we've got some serious issues is, well, it's both boxes, attacking and defending. But the one that's really beginning to frustrate me, and it's frustrated me for a little while now, is those set pieces. Last night we had 15 corners. No point from those corners did I think we looked like we were going to score. And this is the same Luton, which most of the same players as well, that last season for the first half of the Premier League season, every time we went forward for a set piece, teams panicked, and we were getting a lot of our goals from corners in particular. We've got the same player delivering the ball into the box. We've still got Burke in there. We've still got Mengi in there. We've still got Eli in there. We've got Morris in there at times, but obviously Morris was unavailable last night. But none of those corners looked a threat. We've even got Mark McGuinness in there, who's absolutely massive, and actually, he is the one player that looks like the ball is making it to from a lot of them, and that's probably because he is so dominant in the air. But the deliveries aren't. They're not aggressive enough. There's no one attacking the ball, so we're just whipping a ball into the box, which is either getting headed up for another corner or just getting pumped up the pitch, and they'll go on a counter attack. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on the set piece failings we've got at the moment, Jamie.
I think I'd actually disagree with one of the points you made there on McGuinness, a bit of being sort of aggressive and dominant enough in the air. He's not winning anywhere near enough balls in both boxes. I think the first sort of 4 or 5 corners last night in the first half was a Doughty back post swing, and you're trying to isolate McGuinness one on one against a fullback. I can't remember who it was at the back there, but someone that he should absolutely eat up for breakfast in that box, but wasn't. Yeah, I think he might have got the touch on it once or twice, but it was like a last minute touch. I think other than that, I think the Plymouth defender dealt with it really well. So I actually think he's not being dominant at all in that box, and could be doing a lot more. Um, I think what frustrates me is it's rare, unless your name's Gabriel and you play for Arsenal, that you score from first contacts now from corners. It's that second phase that we just are not good enough at. I don't know the last time, or I don't know how many times now you see across all leagues, or all teams, that you have a simple corner in, centre half header goal. It's usually a flick on, and then how does it go, or it maybe the defenders deal with it in a way, but then it goes second phase out of the box, and then you score from there. It's just, yeah, I think it's I think structurally where the players are set up, when we're not set up in the right places to be able to react to those second phases. And you're right. I mean, number of corners we've had, not just last night, but also this season. I'm pretty sure we had a pretty high number against Wednesday, and then previous to that as well. And yeah, to have not scored a single goal from a corner set piece. I think we've scored from second phases of free kicks and stuff, but from an actual corner set piece, yeah, it's not good enough. I think that they're the margins that win titles, or keep teams up. I think if you look at all the years where we, I think if you take that championship season, for example, where we stayed up under the COVID situation, the amount of goals we got from set piece situations. I mean, I think it was Bradley's goal at Huddersfield as well. That's the sort of goal that puts us on the front foot, and then you go away to a Huddersfield team who you're fighting against to stay up, and you score a set piece, go 1-0 up, and then that changes the game. And we're not having enough of those game changing moments right now, and the chances that we do have, we're not converting. So whether that's confidence or ability, I don't know. I think it is harsh to say right now that it's tactically, because all I ask of a tactical setup is to put those players in those situations, but the players just aren't finishing off those chances. And yeah, I think that there's no one individual or whatever to blame. That's Edwards or the players. It's just, I think, a whole mix of things at the minute that just isn't going our way.
And you mentioned the players, well, not hitting the target as such. One player in particular that was highlighted on the Sky coverage last night, and I think across the board Luton fans got incredibly frustrated with, was Eli. We spoke about after Sheffield Wednesday how he didn't really get the rub of the green in terms of the decisions, and he was getting manhandled a lot and nothing really going his way. Well, last night he had chances, but he didn't do anything with them. He went one on one twice, I believe. Was it twice?
Yeah, I think
He
so.
had another. He had a couple of flick-ons where he knocked them down to other players, then got them played back into him. He's had 20 shots now this season, and he's put 8 on target, and he scored none of them. His XG is 3.07, and obviously 0 goals. So what is going wrong for Eli? Because he's a player that scored 10 goals in the Premier League last season.
Yeah, I think, yeah, the stat that flashed up on Sky last night was past 10 games he's had 3.5 xg and scored no goals, and no matter the sort of player you are, like, that isn't good enough. Even if you're a defender, you'd expect them to at least score one from that amount of xg, right? So for it to be our starting number 11, yeah, it's not good enough. I think what's frustrating is he's seeming to shoot when he should pass, and pass when he should shoot. I think that one on one last night, the one that obviously everyone thinks about, where he was through on goal. It came under a bit of pressure from the defender in the end, but he just tries to cut inside and then just loses it. And I think Eli of January this year, especially on the back of that sort of the Brighton and Newcastle games, he just takes it. He's the case. It's not his strongest foot, but he just shoots on his left, um, and it's just not going our way. I think then if on the whole thing about shooting when he should pass, I think he had two opportunities in the second half. I think the one that springs to mind was when he shot that went into the side net end before a corner, where Brown was in acres of space, but he just was a bit stubborn and tried to get a shot away when in reality probably should have squared it to Brown. But I don't know what it is. Is it confidence? It certainly isn't ability, because you say he scored 10 goals in the Prem last year, so you can't question his ability as a player. Maybe last year was above his mean in terms of performance, but he's certainly now below his mean at the minute, and he needs to get back up to at least his sort of average level of ability. Otherwise, it's going to be a long season, and I think that's why I've got a little bit of sympathy towards Edwards right now, is because in the Prem last year, or if that was in that sort of Jan-February period, Eli probably has 2 goals last night. From one of like the one-on-one chances, he had 2 headers. I think the one in the second half, that was free header, and it just goes over. So yeah, I think we should be talking in an alternate universe about Eli scoring 2 goals last night, and it being at worst a 3-3 game, if not a 3-2 or something, because those 2 goals put us ahead. So yeah, it's those fine margins, and we need those margins to change quick. Otherwise, yeah, I think some of the fan views could escalate pretty quickly. I think as we saw last night, I think it's coming to a bit of a head right now. I think there's some fans that maybe weren't having a go or really vocalising their concerns publicly, I think are now starting to. So yeah, I think things need to change quick, or that will just escalate and get worse.
I just wanted to discuss a couple of players who did fairly well. Obviously, in the context of things where we weren't actually great all round. I think on that right side, you've mentioned Walters already, but Zach Nelson as well looked like he was trying to get into the game and he was trying to make things happen. And if we were going to get anything, it looked like it was going to come from that right side with those two very, very young players. They're the two most inexperienced players in our whole squad, but they looked the way they were playing like some of the more mature players.
Yeah, absolutely. I think certainly in that first half, I thought Walters was excellent, and obviously we do those 3 man in the match choices after each game now, and Walters was definitely in that conversation in the first half. Got in behind and it was having a lot of joy against Mumba, who we all know to be a very good player and someone that we would have liked sort of a year or two ago. So yeah, great performance in the first half. I think second half probably made a few too many mistakes, but that's not against the grain of the whole team in general, right? So you can't pick out what was sort of in particular of his mistakes. Then Nelson, yeah, I was really happy to see him start last night. I think as I was saying, there was no one that really had shown me that they were much better than Nelson on that sort of right wing situation. So I was pleased to see him give it a go, and I thought he was okay. Obviously, in the end, Moses comes on for him and gets the goal. So probably I think Moses gets the nod on Tuesday, but a tough game to sort of play in a tough environment, especially given going behind early and then having your front three that you're as part of being Eli, who was obviously off it from a chance perspective, and then Chong, who gets knocked out at half time and then has to go off. So a tough game for him, but I thought he did okay.
Obviously, you mentioned there Chong. We lost him at half time after it looked like he got knocked out. It was somewhat innocuous when he went
Yeah,
down, but obviously the protocols had to be done and he
yeah.
was forced off. But it meant we saw Jacob Brown come back, and whilst he didn't really do that much, he possesses that spark that at times we've lacked alternative options, and I think he gives us that. What do you think?
No, I agree. I think it was really positive to see Brown come back last night. I think we said multiple times, not just this season, but last season, he's probably one of our best pressers in that sort of forward line. So I think that's again something that we're missing right now. And I think Brown, assuming that he came through last night, okay, probably is in contention for Tuesday. If I'm not sure if it's too early for him or not, but maybe needs must based on sort of some of the injury issues at the minute. Again, but no, I think you could tell last night probably a little bit rusty in that second half as expected, given how long he's been out for. But yeah, I think someone that I think could come in and stake that claim for a starting spot pretty soon.
Yeah, and those injuries are a problem, and it's ironic really because a week or so ago we were almost laughing that we finally had most of our players back, and then last night we lose. Well, first we lose Mengi, which is obviously a huge loss. He's probably, I'm not even. He's one of. He was last season. He was our best defender. He's not been amazing so far this season, but he's been growing into it. And then it just looked like he overstretched slightly, and we lost him. We brought on Anderson, and then Mads gets injured after 20 minutes of actual gameplay when he was on, which it just must be so for him. It must be so frustrating because he was out for so much of last season with injuries. He finally comes back, and then he's lost to an injury again. Um, and then obviously we lost Chong to what looked like a potential concussion, although he did get up and walk off, but that was obviously they had to go through the full protocol. So Tuesday night's team against Oxford could be vastly different, and there's a lot of players that could be coming into that side that probably didn't expect to just because of injuries. Obviously Morris was unavailable with a minor injury, I believe.
Yeah.
Hashioka is still out, but I think he'll be back soon, but probably won't be ready for Tuesday, I imagine. So there's a real mishmash of players going to be playing for us. What are your thoughts on? Well, first, I wanted to ask you about Mads Anderson because at times when he played last season, particularly Everton away and Sheffield United away, he looked absolutely immense, particularly in the air. But
Mm.
just the injuries have put so much of a halt to his time with us.
Yeah, it's a massive shame, as you say. I think the games where we'd seen him last year was really promising. I think it was a really aggressive, commanding defender and a player that we'd certainly missed last year. Obviously, for all Mengi's great performances, he was probably lacking a bit of support there at the back sometimes, and I think Anderson would have filled that hole really well. It's just a weird one because I don't think he was particularly injury prone before coming to us. I think it's not like. I mean, it's not like you look at other players where, like Mengi, for example, where I think before he had a few bad injuries, or there's other players that we've signed, like Liam Walsh. Like Liam Walsh's injury record coming to us was a bit like, oh, he's had a few sort of nasty ones. But whereas with Mads, I think coming to us, he might have had one or two minor ones, but I don't recall him having anything that was like sort of red flags on the report that we were looking at. So for him to come in now and obviously a really bad one that sort of ruins half, if not more, his season last year, and then to come back, and it's funny actually. We were at the pub last night and was chatting to Billy, and he sort of was joking about, I'll give him 16 minutes, and I think he came on 41, and then he went down on 57, and I felt it's just
He went off on 58.
yeah, it's just yeah, it is really really frustrating, and yeah, for all our frustration, I can imagine the only person that's more frustrated than all of us is Mads Anderson himself. So I feel sorry for him, and I hope it's not as serious as his last one, because yeah, I think if it is, then that's probably his career in a Luton shirt done, unfortunately, because probably get to next season and you just can't take that risk again with him.
Yeah, he's someone that needs that game time to sort of establish himself even back in the squad. When you've got someone like Holmes, who wasn't even on the bench last night, I don't know if he was unavailable for injury, but I believe he just wasn't selected for the matchday squad. Um, Obviously, Victor Moses came on and scored our only goal, and he has looked very positive when he's played. Do you think that's now him in from the start against Oxford?
Absolutely, you can't have a player come on and impact and change. Not I wouldn't say change. I wouldn't say particularly change the game last night, but he's impacted. Obviously scored the goal, and he could have scored a goal that would have got us back into it and potentially got something out of last night. Obviously, it didn't transpire that way, but he's now come on and impacted in 2 games, and he's surely fit enough to start and play 60 as an absolute minimum, right? So in a game that is so big now on Tuesday, because it's a game we need to win, it's I'll be shocked if he doesn't start. I think I'll put it that way. I think whether we stick with this 3-4-3 or whether we go to a sort of a 3-5-2 or whether we go to a sort of like a 4-2-3-1 style, there's going to be room for him in that team, particularly now with some sort of centre back issues. Potentially Walters then drops back into centre back, and then you put Moses out at wing back. So there's definitely a space for Moses now in that squad for Tuesday, and yeah, I would be shocked if he didn't start.
And he created a second chance. Well, what was an equaliser at the time, but it
Yeah.
was disallowed for offside, which I had huge questions that if that was offside or not. It looked like, I think it was Gibson. It might have been, and if I get his name wrong, apologies, Plymouth fans that are listening. Shooks that was playing him onside, because when he ran down that right side, the defender that was slightly deeper looked like he was playing him on, and then obviously Taylor put it away in exactly the position that Taylor put goals away last season for Lincoln, and for, was it Colchester last season as well? Yeah, Colchester as well. He scored 22 last season across for 2 sides. So incredibly frustrating, but I'm not sure we deserved what would have been. Was it an equaliser? It would have been an equaliser.
It would have been at the time, yeah.
And then they went up the other end and scored a third. So yeah, hugely frustrating, but probably, I mean, nothing more than we deserved, really, we got from that game. Last night, after the game, we asked Luton fans on Twitter to provide us with their thoughts from the game, because whilst there's only 2 of us, we wanted to know the real thoughts around that. So now we're going to discuss some of your comments. So the question that was asked was, another defeat for Luton Town. We want your thoughts from the game. Let us know the comments, and we'll read out the best ones. And it's exactly what we're going to do. The first one is from Ollie LTFC, and he said, "We're one-dimensional, no plan B. Edwards needs to have a long, hard look at himself. Is he really up for the job?" Which is quite an extreme question at the end, but there's, I think, a few people starting to ask that. Obviously, we've already discussed the lack of plan B and the real one-dimensional play to what we're doing, Jamie. But I wanted to ask you about the comment on Edwards needing to have a look at himself. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it. I guess first of all, in terms of headlines, it's too soon to be, I think, thinking about getting rid of him. Absolutely, it's not the way we do things, and I think we all laughed at those lot down the road after getting rid of him after 7 games, and then look what happened, right? And I'm not suggesting that the same will happen to us, but I think before we go any further, I think fundamentally it's too soon to be discussing in or out. But I do think that something isn't quite right there. I think he seems a bit down. He just doesn't seem himself. I think if you look last year, he was always chirpy and having a laugh and a joke with the journalists or whatever in conferences pre and post games. And in the game, he was always sort of up on his feet and really getting involved and animated, and obviously nowhere near as animated as like a Nathan Jones, but sort of for Edwards, he was getting animated and stuff last year. But in particular, these last 2 games, he just seems to have almost sort of not lost interest, but just sort of lost the energy to, and I have sympathy with it, because it's a tough job when I think since that Brighton game in February or whenever it was, I think we've lost 2/3 of the games that we played in. So I can understand why it's really is, how it really does put you down. But then there's questions of whether that translates to the players, right? Because if your manager is a bit sort of lack of energy or a bit down and he's sat on the touchline, as a player, you're not getting that motivation that you might need. Not that players should need motivating, because they've come down from the Premier League and their motivation should be getting back there, right? But sometimes when you're in a tough situation, players look to someone to try and pick you up and go again. And I think, yeah, I don't know whether Edwards is filling that role in particular right now. So something is going on, and I don't know what, and I don't want to speculate or whatever. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks, in particular, just to see if there's a change of motivation or a change of, you know, the dressing room doesn't look as together as it has been in previous seasons. And I know our relative sort of level is one of the most together dressing rooms in the Football League, and it was always sort of that Luton, that special spirit that everyone would love to replicate. So I appreciate that a drop off from that looks worse than it is compared to other teams, but it seems like we've just lost that little bit of Luton spirit that, yeah, I think you probably could say previously was priceless and was one of the big reasons why we got up to the Premier in the first place. So, yeah, I know. But in terms of the other points, yeah, one dimensional, no plan B. Completely agree. I think when you're behind, away from home, you need to try something a bit different. But all of the subs were like for like, and yeah, it's just all in all, it's just a really frustrating position to be in.
And in that sort of same vein, but sort of somewhat against sort of the questions about Edwards, Andrew Ball said, trying the same style every week that isn't working is madness. People calling for him to resign is mental, though. Just needs to get a grip and change it up a bit, and not the same stubborn approach that isn't providing performances. Back to basics. We aren't City. And I think probably that last two sentences, the last two bits there, are the key bits. Back to basics. We've said it on here already. We really need to go back to basics, being solid at the back and putting away our chances when we get forward. And it's something we're not doing at all. The other bit that is interesting was the just needs to get a grip and change it up and not the same stubborn approach. I think it is something that we have seen. Edwards can or has seemed a little bit stubborn in terms of the way he wants to play. He really, really wants to play this high tempo pressing style that gets us the ball back really quickly. But it seems to be what is causing us to concede, certainly last season, in the second half of last season, lots and lots of goals, particularly on the counter attack. We are getting dispossessed either up top or in midfield, and then they're just playing through us with ease. So, yeah, I think I agree with that. I think the stubborn approach, it might not be the case. He might not be stubborn whatsoever, but the fact that he's not changing the system really does strike me as stubborn. Is that something you agree with?
Yeah, I think in game it's stubborn. I think it's probably too soon to say it's stubborn in terms of the start of games, because there's clearly a way that Everett is trying to play, and they've obviously worked on it in training. But I think it's in that 45 to 60 minute mark. If it still isn't working, then you need to change it up or change something up. And especially when you've lost Mengi, bring on Anderson, lose Anderson, but you still sort of persist with a back three by putting them Walters at left centre back. When at that point you could probably switch to a back four, right? Because you're losing, you've lost two centre halves. Just stick Walters right back, Burke and McGuinness centre back, and Doughty left back, and then from there you can bring on Nakamba for Anderson instead. So yeah, I think for me it's the stubbornness in the changes in the game rather than a change from the start of one. I think in terms of the back to basics, for me, what I mean by back to basics is the defensive side of the game rather than the attacking one. I think, I don't know if people want to hear it or not, but we created enough chances and got in enough positions last night to have won that game of football. In terms of, we spoke about Eli, he could have and probably should have scored twice. Obviously, we did score once. Obviously, with Moses, we had 15 corners. So, like, that shows, I guess, in terms of the chance creation perspective, like tactically we created enough chances or got our players in enough positions to be able to win that game of football. But for me it's defensively back to basics, and even if it's not back to basics, but just going back to what we did last year a little bit, I think we've just lost that aggressiveness. I think that the game I go back to is City in the Cup, and okay, yeah, we lost 6-2, but we were so aggressive on Erling Haaland, for God's sake. Like, Mengi was man to man, and okay, he got done because it was Haaland, but we were so aggressive going man to man against City at home in the Cup. And it was a game that, although we lost 6-2, fans came away from that thinking, wow, like that we were really, really aggressive. And if that was any other team other than Man City and Erling Haaland, then it wouldn't have been that outcome. Whereas you looked last night, and I think it was so summed up in that third goal, or even the second goal, right, where you've got, let's go through the goals. The second goal was in transition, where you had Giabi, who managed to run from his own half into our third, and up until a certain point, you understand why they weren't stepping up, because it was one-on-one marking, where you had Burke was on Whittaker, you had McGuinness was on Hardy, and then you had Walters on Sissoko. But at one point, then Burke comes inside to be able to mark Hardy for McGuinness, which then allow McGuinness to step up, but he still didn't until it was too late. Then when he stepped up, he just wasn't aggressive enough. He was hands behind his back and just sort of was trying to block the passing lanes rather than actually just going into him and trying to like tackle and win the ball. So that is a complete lack of aggression. The third goal, Sissoko is outside the area on the right hand side, 1v2 against Clark and Burke, and again they stood there. They stood there as sort of trying to block the lane. And all it takes is a special player. And to be fair to him, Sissoko was really good when he came on. He just managed to sort of like drop his shoulder, go between the two, and then get beyond them and get the shot away. But you shouldn't be getting to that situation. You're 2-on-1. Just put a foot in, for God's sake. Don't back off and let him run at you. So for me, that is the back to basics that I just think we need to think about is defensively. Those two situations shouldn't happen. The first goal shouldn't happen, because you should have more of an effort to put your foot on it, and even if it does get through, McGuinness step up and just really just be aggressive and in their face. But we're just lacking that way too much. All three goals were avoidable, and I think if that was Luton of 2 years ago, we come away from that game having kept a clean sheet probably, and probably scored a goal to win 1-0. And that's the overriding sort of frustrating feeling.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's hugely frustrating because the goals look avoidable that we're conceding. I just wanted to touch on this next one by a friend of the pod, Kev Lennon, and he said, "We have little shape or style, and game after game, getting outnumbered in key areas of the pitch, whilst also playing too many players out of confidence. About time Rob Edwards opened his eyes and goes back to basics." So it's again asking for that back to basics. But the thing I wanted to touch on there is little shape or little style, and we don't really look like we've got any sort of organisation at the moment, particularly out of possession, as you've mentioned there, and getting outnumbered in key areas. It's something you've just obviously just said about the three players marking their man and no one stepping up. But we are getting, in defence, we're getting outnumbered because our wing backs are high and their teams are coming at us on the counter in numbers, and it's catching us out time and time again. I just wanted to. What changes in terms of, is it the personnel that needs changing for that? Is it we need to play deeper? Do we need to be more direct?
I mean, it's the $1 million question, right? And if I had the answer, I'd be in that seat, and I'm not. So yeah, I think it's too simple to say it's a change of system in terms of the back three. I think maybe you stick an extra midfield, you stick that extra midfielder in there, but then you maybe lack a bit of width in terms of sort of Chong and Nelson were, or Chong and Moses last night. I do have questions on McGuinness a little bit. I think in terms of he's the one player in that defensive line that maybe isn't quite used to our style yet in terms of the aggressive defending. I think Burke and Mengi are more aggressive than McGuinness is, and I think there was two situations that I spoke through this in terms of the first and the second goals where he just didn't step up when he probably should have done. And if that's Tedden last year, he steps up and then wins that ball. So yeah, is it personnel? Is it system? I don't know, mate. It's really frustrating. Should we go to a back four? Maybe, given the injury issues at the minute now, having potentially lost Tedden and lost Mads, maybe it forces his hand, because otherwise you're probably one more injury away from going back to what we had last year with Hashi and Doughty in the back three. And if we get to that situation, and I think everyone would call for his head because of the fact that you're still persisting with a back three and you've only got like fullbacks in that back three again. So yeah, I mean, in terms of centre halves that we know are available for Tuesday, you've got Walters, Burke, McGuinness, and then obviously depending on Holmes. I think if you've got those four centre half options, I think you've got to go to a back four just because you like do you play Holmes in there, and Holmes isn't a wide defender, so you're going to put Holmes left centre back. I don't know. McGuinness obviously is that central defender, and Burke I think on the right is on the whole very good. So then do you put Walters on the left instead? Even that seems a bit sort of square peg round hole type when you've got a player who you want to play at wing back quite clearly, but then you put in him at left centre back. I think going to a back four with Walters and Doughty as the fullbacks and Burke and McGuinness as the centre halves probably is the way forward at the minute, especially given the injuries. Obviously, if Mengi is okay, or if Mads is okay, then maybe it changes. But yeah, lots and lots of choices.
Just one final tweet, and I don't want to discuss this one. It just one that made me laugh when I read it last night. It's clear what Rob Edwards is trying to do, but he's persevering with it when it isn't working, regardless of personnel, and the players look uncomfortable. It's like watching your pissed up virgin mate try and chat up a supermodel after he stumbled into the VIP area. Painful. And we're going to go to a break now, but when we get back, we'll be talking all things Oxford United on Tuesday night. Welcome back to Oak Road Hatter, where I'm still joined by Jamie Castle. And whilst we have finished talking the negative side of things with Luton, talking about that Plymouth defeat, we're now looking ahead to Tuesday night's game against Oxford United, and that's at home against Kenilworth Road. It's a game that, when you look at it before the season starts, it's almost a sort of a certain result. But now you look at it form-wise, Oxford are miles ahead of where we are. And in terms of the league table, they're up to ninth. Well, they're ninth. We are now firmly 16th in the league. And that's we've played a game more than pretty much every team in the league as well. So it's not going particularly well for us. But yeah, Oxford United, they've got 3 wins and 3 defeats from their opening 6 games. Obviously, at the time of recording, they play Burnley today. So who knows what that's going to be? But I mean, you can see Burnley getting a result there, but also it's Scott Parker, and his side sometimes slip up against the teams they're expected to beat. So in terms of at home, they're getting results quite consistently, and they're beating some decent sides. They beat Norwich 2-0 on the opening day of the season at home. They've beaten Preston and they've beaten Stoke at home as well in the league. But away from home, they're really struggling. They're yet to win. So they've lost to Coventry, Blackburn, and Bristol City, and then obviously face Burnley at home today, as we mentioned. So it is an opportunity for us to get a result because they're not picking up results away from home, but they are scoring goals. So I just wanted to have a look at the players they've got available to face us and the players that could cause problems for us. Obviously, in terms of a Luton connection, they have got Peter Chiozo, who is in and out of the starting lineup. He's sort of rotated with Sam Long has played a fair few games, so Peter Chiozo struggling to get in at right back. But going forward, they do have threats. They're without Cameron Brannigan, who's probably their best player. I think there's little question about that. He's out for about 6 weeks, I think, but they've still got someone like they've got Ruben Rodriguez in there, so he's scored 1 and got 2 assists this season from 6 league games, so he is a real threat behind the striker. And in that midfield area where we've really struggled to control games, I think he's someone that could cause some problems. Another player that is going to potentially cause problems, and it's a player that, apologies to Oxford fans because I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his surname. It's Tyler Goodrum, I think, or Goodham, I don't know. He's only young, he's only 21 years old, but he's got a goal so far this season. And before the season started, he was a player that Oxford fans told us to keep an eye on, he'd be their key player. So he's a wide player in that midfield area who likes to cut inside. So that midfield where we look like we're very, very open and have struggled to defend is where a lot of their threats are coming from, Jamie.
Yeah, I think the players that you've mentioned, obviously all good players. I think I remember Rodriguez for Notts County was ripping up sort of the conference and got his move in the end to League One, and then he's now in the Championship. I think it's a player that we all thought when he was in the conference that he definitely was way below his level. So yeah, I think it is a player that is getting his time at this level and definitely well deserved. I think you've pointed out, I guess, some of the midfield players in terms of because of our midfield, obviously, the minute is obviously has questions over it, but they've got a lot of, I think, interesting wide players in terms of Dembele. They had Placetta, I think they've got Carl Edwards, they've got Malcolm Ebioway, they've got some real sort of depth in terms of those sort of wide forward players. So again, I think we've definitely been exposed sometimes out wide, especially if Doughty and Waters are caught too high. So that's probably an area for me, probably of slight concern. I think Dembele could certainly get in behind Waters or in behind Doughty, depending on what side he plays on. So yeah, I think that's probably the area for me where we need to really shore up. I mean, it seems like they play a bit of like a 4-1-4-1 or a 4-3-3. Which again, if we persist with this two-man midfield, we can quickly be outnumbered. So it probably is the perfect game actually to try and change things and see if we can just try a slightly different setup under the lights at home to Oxford. And I think if you say that those things together, it quickly reminds you of that Keith Keane masterclass in terms of the goal he scored from the corner. So we've had some good games against them in the past, and particularly under the lights, and just hopefully we can come out on the right side of them.
Another player that I wanted to highlight, and he's their obvious goal threat, it is Mark Harris. He's already got 4 league goals from 6 games this season, including an absolute worldie against Blackburn earlier in the season, which somehow wasn't even nominated for Goal of the Month, I don't think. But if you haven't seen that goal, I suggest you go and find it and watch it because it is absolutely brilliant. But he's a real threat in and around the box with his goals. He's obviously scored, 4 just this season alone. So, and that's for a newly promoted side as well. He's had 12 shots, 7 on target, 4 goals. So he's pretty clinical when you look at the stats, especially when you're comparing it to what our strikers are currently doing, Eli in particular. So it will be a game where our defence will be tested, and Kaminsky will also be tested, who luckily has shown he is still at his best in terms of shot stopping. We didn't discuss it when we talked about the Plymouth game, but he made some really, really top saves in that game. And he'll probably need to make a couple of decent saves against Oxford as well. But it's a game that we need to look to try and dominate because it's a side that struggle away from home. We've mentioned that. And our home form so far is pretty terrible, aside from that win against Sheffield Wednesday, which probably wasn't really deserved in terms of the way things went on the pitch. We discussed earlier the injuries we've got and the potential changes that we might have to see. I very much doubt Chong will be available if he did get knocked out. The concussion protocols just won't let him play. Do you think Jacob Brown comes in from the start?
Yeah, it's tough because I don't know where he is in terms of his fitness or his sort of his plan to get back to full fitness. I think Moses is the one that you look at really in terms of it's a different side to Chong, but in terms of really probably should be starting. I think Brown certainly in the squad and certainly comes on regardless of the game state at the time, whether we're winning or not. I think the one that I look at in terms of coming in is Joe Taylor. I think up until now I've said you need to persist with Eli. You need to keep giving him the chances because the last thing you want to do is ruin his confidence. And ultimately, sometimes you have to play players into form. And I think Eli's one of those players where you have to play him into form. But it's getting to the point now where you've got a 20+ goal a season striker from last year that's sat there on the bench. And at what point do you prioritise the team over one particular player's form and confidence? It's a really hard thing to balance, and I think that that's obviously why Edwards is paid the big bucks. But certainly thinking about Joe Taylor on Tuesday. And you mentioned Mark Harris. I think they're very similar profiles of player. They're sort of players that really cause issues and really press you, and they've got that sort of that good turn of pace, but not overly rapid, but they just very agile, and I think he's a sort of striker that if he's running at you because you're a centre half on the ball, you probably get a little bit scared because he's just that much of like a bulldog type. So yeah, I would personally start both Moses and Taylor on Tuesday. I think it's time to give Eli a bit of a rest, certainly from the start. And if Morris isn't quite fit, then that leaves Joe Taylor. So a front three of look, if Brown is fit enough, and you can do Moses, Taylor, Brown as like a front three, I think that just that injects a bit more freshness and a bit more life into that front three.
And we've obviously mentioned it already in quite a lot of depth because of the injuries we've now picked up in defence, annoyingly, because we did have players back. It could be potentially a back four. So is that a 4-3-3 for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we can say that absolutely we're going to change, right? Because there's no sign right now that Edwards is gonna do a back four based on, I guess, the stubbornness, as people put it, in terms of the back three. I think if it is a back three, it's probably going to be Burke, McGuinness, Walters in that three, with then probably actually Moses right wing back and Doughty left wing back. That's probably the back five if he persists with it. But if he does change to a four, as I think he should, then yeah, it's probably going to be a 4-3-3 or probably a 4-2-3-1. Actually, I'd probably do Walters right back, Doughty left back, McGuinness and Burke centre back, Krause and Nakamba as that midfield two. Then Moses right, Brown left, Taylor in the middle with number 10 can be, take your pick, Jordan Clark, Liam Walsh. Yeah, there's a few options that you can play in that number 10 role. And ironically, maybe even Cordy Woodrow. I think he's probably someone in a number 10 that can actually link up play really well. I think that's one of his strengths at the minute is linking up play. So if he wants to be given a go in the number 10, that's probably the one role that he can probably do right now, rather than being shoved out in sort of like that right wing role that he played last night. Yeah, I'd love to see a 4-2-3-1 be given a go.
Yeah, we do give a lot of. Well, I think Luton fans generally, Cordy Woodrow gets a lot of slack from them, but in terms of the when he's played, he's had very few minutes when he's actually played, and he's been shoehorned into a lot of positions he doesn't play in. So maybe get him in behind the striker might be the perfect move, and he could really step up for us. It's difficult to say. I mean, Morris could be back if he is fit and available. Do you start him?
Absolutely, absolutely. If he's fit, you start him. And actually, I mean, I'm joked about Cordy Woodrow, but I think Carlton Mawson at number 10. Again, I don't like comparing to, I guess, the elite level players, but you look at sort of the way Harry Kane drops in, and I think ironically Harry Kane in like a number 10 type role, certainly for England would have worked pretty well in terms of that link up play. And I think playing Carlton Morris off Joe Taylor in it, you called it a number 10, but it could be a 4-4-2, right, where with Morris being that deeper lying sort of in the whole striker behind Taylor. I think that sort of system, I think Morris and Taylor together could be a pretty frightening partnership.
And is Oxford on Tuesday a must win now, do you think?
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, it's not a must win because of, I guess, what it could mean for table position. It's way too early to say it's a must win, because if we don't, then it's really going to be a relegation battle. I don't believe, regardless of the outcome of Tuesday, that will be any sort of danger. So it's not a 6-pointer or anything. It's just I just think the players need it, and I think I think Rob needs it. I think if we don't win, if we certainly if we lose on Tuesday, then yeah, I think Rob's in a pretty sticky position, because you go into a really tough game then away at Sheffield United, where they're probably clear favourites, and that could get messy, especially with Sheffield United's current run of form. If we go into that game on the back of back-to-back defeats against Plymouth and Oxford, then yeah, I think it could get messy really quick. So I think it's a must-win for Rob, not to save his job or anything, but just for him, because I think if he mentally, if he doesn't win on Tuesday, or if he loses, I think he'll find it really tough as well.
Because he is looking seriously dejected in press conferences, but even more so on the side of the pitch. Even when we've won the couple of games recently, he doesn't seem happy. And I think what Luton fans know is Rob Edwards being incredibly happy and having a lot of people looking at him because of his smile, which is not something we're seeing at the moment. It's really not nice to see, because I think it almost, I think it's making it worse in terms of sort of division, because fans want someone to get behind. They want someone who's got that energy on the sideline. And at the moment, we haven't got that.
Yeah.
And in terms of must win, I think this is a must win as well, because just the way that it's sort of going with the fans at the moment as well, I think it's getting a bit sour. Things aren't being changed when it's not working, and I think that needs to be changed. So we need not just a win, but I think we either need a comfortable result or a really good performance at home, just to get people back on side and see that things are going in our favour. Jamie, the final thing we're going to do a score prediction for the game, which neither of us had any luck so far this season. So, I mean, I'm going to start on this one,
Okay.
and I'm being positive. I'm going for 3-1 Luton.
Yeah, whether it's orange tinted glasses, whether it's naivety, whether it's just a real desire to see a Luton win, and I think, as you say, obviously before going to the score, as you say, performance is really key here, because okay, we could win on Tuesday, a bit like we beat Sheffield, beat Wednesday, but I think even that wouldn't really settle a lot of fans. If we won in the same format that we won at home last, I think even then some fans would probably still get on the backs. So I think performance is really key, as you say. So on that, I think I'm going to keep the faith. I'm gonna have the faith that there's going to be a couple of slight changes that really freshens the team up. And as you say, I think Oxford look good at home, but I think away they're struggling a little bit. So I'm going to go 2-0.
2-0 for you and 3-1 for me. That's all from us for today. As always, we would love to know your thoughts from everything we've discussed, whether that is the Plymouth performance, the result, or even your score predictions for Oxford United on Tuesday night. So let us know on social media, at us at Oak Road Hatter on X or Twitter, or even comment if you're watching on YouTube, or get in touch. Send us an email, info@Oak Road Hatter. We love hearing from you. So just let us know what you think about what we're talking about. But from me and from Jamie, thank you for listening.